I'm not a counselor or a minister, or I'm not anybody. I mean, I'm not a person who ever even likes to speak in front of people. I mean, like I said earlier, I like to set everything up and push someone out in front and just go, okay, they can do all the talking. And what I am is somebody who is speaking from experience, and from my own personal experience, but also from friends. And about 5 years ago, it just came to me that I just really wanted to talk to somebody, talk to people who are thinking about getting a divorce, or people who were, having trouble in their marriage. And I wanted to talk to them and just say, hey, look, here's what's going to happen if you decide to get a divorce. But I didn't know how to do that. I mean, it's just been one of those things that I knew I wanted to do this. I knew I wanted to do this, but I had no idea. How do you find somebody who's fighting and is on the brink of divorce, other than going to a counselor's office, and that's private. So I just had this on my heart, and I teach 4-year-old Sunday school here. I have for 10 years, and she's actually the co-teacher. She teaches every other Sunday. And so they asked me, I had a kid who was in my class who was from a single mother, and they asked me to talk to her. And then, right after that, they asked me to teach a single parenting class. And I was like, oh, well, maybe that's my in. Maybe I'll teach this single parenting class for a year or two, and that's how I start meeting people and that prepares me to talk in front of people who aren't little. And I can prepare to talk to adults, and this is going to be my in. Well, immediately, we start looking for single parenting videos and single parenting class help. There is nothing out there. There's 3 or 4 videos. There's 7 million single mothers in the United States. 7 million. And there's 4 programs that teach you how to be a single parent. And I don't even know the credibility of 2 of them. I've only watched 2. And most of them, the ones we've watched, are from men who've never been divorced. They've been married for 30 years. So I'm thinking, God, so when I was looking for this, I had this, the singles minister said, well, you should do a video. Well, at the same time, I happened to be going through this 10-week purpose class, not the Purpose-Driven Life. It's for women, but it's by a woman who works with Rick Warren. And it's called Pathway to Purpose, and it's for women. Well, I was going through this 10-week thing, and about the 5th week, she's like, Melva, your purpose is to talk to people who are thinking about going through divorce. That is just what all this stuff you're going through, it tells. So at the same time, they're telling me I needed to do a video, because there's none out there, for single parenting and people thinking about going through divorce. 2 days later, I say, okay, I want to do a video. I want to, that's how I'm going to reach people. And so 2 days later, I go to a video shoot at my work, and actually Ron was there, and he's somebody I worked with 5 years ago, and he now owns a company that does missionary videos. Awesome. And I told him I said, well, they've been telling me, and I don't want to do it, but they're telling me that I need to do this. And Ron's like, I'm on board. I am behind this, because we can make a big impact on people who are thinking about divorce. So Ron's like my big cheerleader, somebody I hadn't seen for 5 years. Well, so then I'm like, okay, I think I'm supposed to do this. Well, then they asked me, but I still have this fear of talking in front of people. I'm teaching my single parenting class, but, they asked me to give my testimony here at church. Well, I'm petrified. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's really making myself vulnerable and open myself up. So I was asked to do that, but I'm scared to death. Well, I'm at work the day I'm supposed to give my testimony. I'm speaking to this lady who's a trainer at work, and she asked me to do something that night. I said, no, I can't. I have to do a testimony at church, and I'm scared to death. She goes, well, I teach people to be public speakers. Come by my office, and I'll teach you. I'm like, okay, every time I have an objection, you have an answer, God, and can't I have a no? So I went by her office, and she gave me all these points on how to be a public speaker and all that. And so it's just amazing. I mean, it's just, so here I am. This is the first thing that I'm doing, for this Divorce Realities. But okay, that's how I'm here. And I want to point out that there are some marriages that should end. I mean, I'm not here to say you need to save your marriage. I'm not here to give advice and tell you what to do because your husband's doing this or none of that. I am not here for that. What I'm here for is to tell people, okay, if you decide not to work it out, this is what you can expect. And you get to decide if the aftermath is better than the situation that you're in now. So that's what, I'm here to reach the people who go, oh, I just don't love him anymore, or we just don't have anything in common, or we've grown apart. I hear that a lot, and to me, personally, I don't think that's a reason for divorce. There's biblical reasons for divorce, and there are, like, physical reasons for divorce, but those reasons, to me, aren't real reasons. And if you can work it out, then, I think it's important. I asked questions about 3 months ago. I sent an email to about 50 friends and acquaintances and asked them questions that would help me do this, and I got tons of really good answers. Some people were really, really candid, and they were like, don't tell my husband this, but, their current husband, they've been divorced and they're remarried, and this is what they said, don't tell my current husband this. But so, first thing I'm going to do is discuss topics of, I'm going to discuss topics of some triggers of divorce, and then I'm going to talk about, like, some of the aftermath. So, oops, I forgot my one thing. Okay, this is the demise of our society. And the reason I say that is because this was the very first disposable product that was ever invented. And what happens to it? We throw it away. So what has happened is that we've invented everything is disposable. We have everything, and what it's done is it's made our whole society disposable, including people. You can see that especially in the workforce. People have been in workforce 25 years. Sorry, we can't use you anymore. It just has made everything disposable, and including our marriages. People want instant gratification. We have fast food joints. We go to the fast food joint. We have, we want our food in a minute, right? We want our food right now when we want it. We go to Walmart. We buy something. If we don't like it, what do? We throw it away, and we go buy something else that we like better. All you women can relate to this. We want to take a pill and make us lose 5 pounds overnight, right? We don't want to do it the healthy way. That's why all these promises of all this stuff that's going to make us happy. We think we're going to take a pill, wake up 5 pounds thinner. But nobody wants to do things the old-fashioned hard work. We don't want to take the self-discipline that it takes to push ourselves away from the table and the commitment it takes to go to the gym. Those take self-discipline and commitment. And it's the same thing with our marriage. We've just become disposable and instant gratification. We aren't craftsmen anymore. We want what we want now. A long time ago, people used to build their houses. They used to build their furniture, and they used to sew their own clothes. And that's laborious. It took long time, and you put care into thought and craftsmanship into it. And you took a while, it took a long time, but when you were done, it might have taken a lot of pain and suffering and finances and all that. But in the end, when you were done with it, you had it for the rest of your life. You could keep it and say, I did this, I worked on this, and I made it work, and look, I have this. So I call it short-term pain for long-term gain. And that's what I think that we have to do in our marriages too, is that maybe we're going through a year or 2 or 3 of really bad times, but think about how great, if you can work through that. I always hear people who say that we worked through it and we got through it and our marriage is stronger than it ever was. And that's because you think, gosh, if we can survive this, man, we are a team. So that's what I hope that people will carry away with that. Do you agree with the craftsman and the disposable society? Hasn't that, it's the norm to get divorced. it's not, there is still a bit of shame, to that because we failed, but we're disposable. It just is, it's ingrained in us now, and it's really kind of a shame. Do you agree with that? Do you think that our crafts...
Feelings indisposable.
Uh-huh.
But if that's what what they want to do, that's their decision.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel that way because that's not my decision.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm not going to make that decision. So do I feel indisposable? No. I feel blessed and glorified.
Yeah.
Because it's not my decision.
Yeah.
And,
Good.
You know, and that's what, you know, but, you know, you just carry that with you in each marriage.
Uh-huh.
If you don't resolve it then or try to get through it and then, you know, give it time and I don't know.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, that's true. And that's one thing that I wanted to emphasize is that we have no control over, you know, sometimes I sit in some of my classes and I hear people saying, well, he did this and he did this. You know what? We have no control over that. And what we can do is we can learn from, you know, these realities and we can say, you know what? I have control. If I do my part and I do everything that I'm supposed to do, you know, even if this person doesn't, you know, but I am going to get to this part of sometimes we don't do what we're supposed to do. I'm going to talk about the next topic is the grass is greener. This is what I call it, the grass is greener. And you guys know what I'm talking about. So your spouse and you have been feeling distant and not getting along, and you don't feel the passion and the excitement that you did when you were together. So, you know, the guy down the hall has just kind of been smiling at you, and he's been stopping in your office and talking just a little bit longer than what's really acceptable, and maybe you start going to lunch, and maybe he buys you a small gift, and it's kind of exciting that somebody like pays attention to you and is interested in you and thinks you're attractive. Well, you like that thrill. It's interesting, and it's kind of like what you experienced with your spouse. As they say, the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. Well, as our pastor here, Pastor Henry says, the grass is greener where you water it most. If you were spending the water that you were spending on the person next door to you and using it on your own grass, your grass would be greener and things would look a lot rosier than they do with this person next door. Because you're not watering the right grass, you know. If we treated our spouse the way we were treating this person, you know, even you don't feel like it, you don't want to. I mean, you're mad at them. They've treated you bad and you don't want to. But as Pastor Henry says, act how you want to feel. And you know what? That takes letting your pride down. It takes letting all your pride down and saying, okay, this is embarrassing and it'll be awkward. And I had a friend this weekend. I went to Orlando, and my friend said that about a year ago they had a lot of difficulties in their marriage, and it was their third marriage. And they're like, oh, I don't want to fail. Neither one of them wanted to fail again, but they just were living separate lives. So they had a real serious talk. And they said they went through a week of where they acted towards each other how they really wanted to feel towards each other. They held hands and they'd look at each other and go, oh, this is weird. For a whole week, they had really awkward moments. But you know what happened after that week of them treating each other how they really wanted to? Was they started feeling that way again towards each other. So I really believe that what Pastor Henry says, act how you want to feel, you know, but you have to let that pride down because, man, that thing gets in the way. You don't want to because that person treated you bad. So I just think that has a lot of validity to it when you say act how you want to feel. And maybe you can practice that. You're ready to do it on your spouse. Practice it on somebody else. If you don't like somebody and you're having a difficult time with them, maybe you should act like you like them and see what happens. In fact, I might even try that this week. I have somebody that I might try that on. There's a quote by Douglas Jerrold: "Happiness grows at our own firesides and is not to be picked in strangers' gardens." I think that's really cool. You know, it's kind of says the grass is greener in your own house. One thing that the grass is greener implies is trust, and even the suspicion of something breaks trust. Not necessarily the act, but the suspicion. And one thing I tried to tell someone is, you know, you go to lunch with women, you might even go to lunch with your sister. You might go to lunch with your cousin. But you go to lunch with a person of the opposite sex, and you're married, and your spouse doesn't know about it. What happens is maybe they'll go, oh, I saw your husband at lunch with some blonde person. Well, if you haven't told your spouse, that might lead to suspicion. And what that does is it breaks trust. Even if you don't think and you say, oh, I trust my husband, I trust, it does. The suspicion breaks trust. And I never had thought about that before, but when I read it, I thought that is exactly true. The suspicion breaks it. One thing I really admire in men is I forgot to tell you, I've been divorced 11 years, and I was married for 10, and I have been through everything with divorce. I've dated a whole bunch of people. I've been through seems like all the time I have to re-forgive. I say, oh, I forgive him. Everything's great. But I do have to keep re-forgiving. But one of the things that I admire in men is when I start a conversation with a person in business or socially or at church, no matter what, I admire the most when a man within the first 2 or 3 sentences says, my wife and I went to a movie the other day, or my wife and kids and I went to this vacation, it was great, or my wife read this book. The minute he says, my wife, it puts a hedge on the relationship. You know exactly where it's going. You know that, and I have a thing about men who don't wear wedding rings that irks me. It bothers me a lot. Because I don't know why. There are some reasons why men don't wear rings, whatever they are. But if a man says that right up front, he tells you right there where the relationship's going. He tells you who's first in his life, don't cross any boundaries with me. And I just admire that. I wished every married man would go there and would just respect that and honor that vow. We shouldn't push the envelope. We shouldn't allow ourselves to entertain thoughts that would cheapen the marriage vows. Just don't even entertain the thoughts. Don't say, oh, he's really cute. If I just flirt, it'll be okay. I know that's hard. And my friend this weekend told me, she goes, that's my biggest downfall. I would never do anything to do anything to my marriage, but I do flirt. Well, we push the envelope there, that's pushing the envelope. I'm going to read something real quick. I have a whole lot of different articles, and what I'm saying isn't things that I learned on my own. I've read tons of things. I've talked to tons of single people, and so I have lots of things that I'm going to reference and things. Here's Dear Reverend Graham, how do you know if your marriage is over? My husband says he loves me, but I found out a few months ago that he's been seeing another woman, and he still is. We're separated now, and I don't see how we can ever start over. Dear A.S., almost nothing in life is more painful than being betrayed by a spouse. It rips at the heart and grieves the soul, and no one escapes unhurt. And it says to read Proverbs 6:28-29, and I actually forgot to write that down. I deliberately use the word betrayed because when a husband and wife commits adultery, they are betraying the solemn vow of faithfulness they took when they were married. Not only have they betrayed their spouse, but they have also betrayed their vow to God. Your marriage can be restored with God's help, but only if both you and your husband submit your lives to Christ and seek His help to begin again. And I've seen this happen, often in the face of the most impossible odds. But it won't happen if your husband refuses to turn away from his sin and renew his commitment to you in your marriage. Pray for your husband that he will see the foolishness of his ways and repent of his sin. And ask God also for patience because you don't know what the future holds. And the reason I read that is because I want people who are here because of that reason to know that there's hope. And, I honestly believe, I truly believe in miracles, and I truly believe that every single relationship, no matter how bad it is, I've seen it in several friends they hated each other. They had both betrayed each other and they hated each other. And they both said, you know what, we're not going to do this. And they turned around and they are happily married. I've seen a couple that totally got divorced. And then they went, oh, this is crazy. We can't do this for our kids' sake. And they got back together and they are happily married now and have been for 10, 15 years. So I read that for a reason because I'm talking about betrayal. I'm going to go back and cover one thing that I that I forgot. No, I guess I didn't. The next thing I want to talk about is happiness. I don't think that you can find your happiness from somebody else. I think you have to have it within you. I think a lot of marriages think, oh, well, they make me happy. Well, only you can make you happy. But if you think about this, I read this somewhere. I thought this was so fascinating. And it's so simple. People get divorced for the same reason that they got married, because they think it's going to make them happy. Isn't that weird? I mean, have you ever thought about that? Okay, we get married because we're so happy. But we think we're going to get a divorce because it's going to make us happy. Well, how many times does that happen? I mean, you know, I think you have to search for the happiness within you. And I read somewhere that it's more about joy. And what that is it's more about the joy comes from no matter what your circumstances are, no matter what somebody's doing from you, you're responsible for yourself. That's kind of like codependency. So I wanted to read a thing on happiness. I bought this book, Managing Your Moods, for me. But I was like, hey, this will fit. This is great. I want to read this. And through numerous emotions, and though numerous emotions flit through our hearts every day, one feeling is esteemed more than all others: happiness. We don't really mind what God has planned for us so long as we are guaranteed happiness in the midst of it. We want to live happily ever after. And what keeps us happy? When things go our way. When everything runs smoothly in the direction we had hoped it would go, we are able to maintain a pleasant frame of mind. No bumps, no interruptions, no inconveniences. In order to maintain our personal contentment, we begin to avoid situations that might compromise our happiness. I just want to be happy. That's not so bad. That's not such an unreasonable desire, is it? Or is it not? When we place our own happiness as the highest goal in life, we do so at a great cost. In doing so, we decide our happiness is more important than anyone else's. This self-centeredness begins to skew our perceptions. We begin to insist on people jumping through hoops. Everything should fall in line with our expectations. If we are not happy, then things need to change. It's all about me, my plan, my choice, my favorites, my best interests, my comfort, and my happiness. And then there's a quote over here. The human heart is selfish, prefers its own way, fights being molded by God, and doesn't want to give in when we don't get what is rightfully ours. We're stubborn, prideful, and strong-willed. And these unbecoming characteristics are most starkly revealed in our relationships. Isn't that fascinating? I mean, really, when you have a strife with somebody, it's about selfishness and about, well, we want to be happy. And, you know, that's like I was talking about. We get married to be happy, and we get divorced to be happy. So what role do you think our selfishness and desire for happiness plays in our relationships? I mean, can't you see how it causes divorce? I mean, I think we deserve to be happy. I think that God wants us to be happy, but He didn't promise that it was going to be easy. Do you agree? You agree?
As far as being happy, I don't know if that's what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's the other person saying mean things or doing mean things,
Mm-hmm.
and not so, let's say, inconsiderate.
Yeah.
Not mean.
Mm-hmm.
Inconsiderate
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more hurtful. You know, I don't know that. Is that wanting to be happy?
Yeah, well,
It is.
I mean, when it's hurtful, that is emotional abuse.
So you're unhappy.
You're unhappy because you've allowed, and I say you've allowed, I've done it a million times to let somebody say something to me, and it just, I base my whole self-worth on what somebody else thinks about me. I mean, you know, it's just this fine line of, you know, I've caught myself in the trap of, I'm really happy, going along great, and then I get in a relationship, and all of a sudden it's like I've lost all my self-esteem, you know? But have I sold myself out because I'm so worried about that person being happy? And I don't know, I mean, it is a fine line. I mean, yeah, we do want to be happy. We can't control what the other person says. But a lot of times, I guess I'm saying about the happiness is that maybe this person that's saying the mean things needs to hear this. Is that about your happiness? I mean, are you trying to be happy at somebody else's expense? You know? Or are you trying to make yourself feel better at somebody else's expense?
You know, we offend when someone's offending us.
Oh, we defend.
Defend, yeah, we defend when someone's
Exactly.
offending us. You know, it's like we got a guard and we're just going to protect ourselves.
Yep.
And, you know, it's not like we're trying to be hurtful. It's just, it's like...
We try to defend.
Or you're just trying to realize that it doesn't feel good for both.
And so a lot of things. I watched Dr. Phil today, and it was amazing. It was about divorced people, and there was this married couple or divorced couple on there, and she was the mom was really hateful to the stepmom and the dad, and she was causing a lot of problems in the marriage, in the new marriage, and she just said things that were just horrid. And so Dr. Phil was talking to him and saying, hey, this is all about the kids, and I'll get to that in a minute. This is all about the kids. This is, you know, you guys, your deal's done. Why are you still bickering back and forth? And at the very end, he offered to give help. He offered to give, you know, counseling. He offered to have a mediator so that they never had to speak to each other again. And at the end, she goes, see, the truth hurts, doesn't it? And he goes, why did I just spend half an hour on a TV show and offer to do this? You had to get that last jab in, didn't you? You had to say that one last little thing to make yourself feel better. I was like, wow, what a great thing. I never get to watch Dr. Phil, but it was perfect for what I was going to talk about tonight. So, okay, that was happiness.
We've had problems in that area. You know, getting the last
word
in, even if it's just stupid. Stupidity. And you realize we have to fight fair.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I guess you wouldn't say fight. But that's fair.
Would you rather be happy or would you rather be right? That's basically what it is. Would you rather be happy or would you rather be right? Do you have to be right? Do you have to be first? Do you have to be... I have that problem too.
So hard.
It is hard to get the last word in. Yeah, but that lady, boy, yeah.
How about, say, he does say something that hurts you, and so you tell him that, and then he calls you critical.
Ooh. That's hard. You know, the one thing I've heard a lot of is if you tell them your feelings. I did this to somebody the other day. I said, I'm telling you how I feel. I can't change my feelings. Our feelings are our feelings. I mean, I don't want to feel this way, so it's kind of like preferences. God gives us preferences. We don't know why we like chocolate ice cream over vanilla. We don't know why we like guys who have dark hair and are tall and blue-eyed. We don't know why. That's just inbred in us. God put that in our souls. That's just who we are. But, you know, it's the preferences, you know, that we can't help how we feel. So if you talk about how you feel, this is how I feel. The person cannot, I mean, they can. People can do whatever, you know, they can come back and say anything to you, but they cannot condemn you for how you feel. It is how you feel. So if we just always approach it as this is how this makes me feel, this is how this, not you make me feel this way, this is how I feel when you go out with the guys till 3 in the morning. I feel abandoned, I feel lonely, I feel rejected. They can't deny that. I mean, you know, maybe they can come back and say hateful things, but really deep down.
So when they say something that's mean or spiteful, you know, definitely it's important to say, I feel, you know, my feelings are hurt. You say things like that.
Maybe even deeper than that. I feel rejected.
Yeah. Definitely you need to, you know, make a stand for yourself, because that mental abuse, that emotional abuse can definitely eat away at you over time.
And it robs you of your happiness.
Yeah, and I think for me, I was too scared to say anything, because what if he gets mad at me and leaves me, you know?
Yeah.
And so I was too scared to say, don't talk to me like that, don't tell me I'm an idiot, because I'm not. You know?
But don't you think that they lose respect for you when you don't stand up for yourself too? Because if you do and you say, I'm not going to tolerate that, I won't be talked to that way, they'll go, wow, wow. Because they can walk all over you. If somebody can walk all over you, they don't respect you because you have lost your self-esteem. Believe me, I've been there. It's like, I mean, I just am out of a relationship a couple months ago where I let the person walk all over me, and it just killed my self-esteem. And until I was out of the relationship, I look back and go, I let every boundary I have be crossed. No wonder he didn't respect me, because I let him cross every boundary I had. And we'll get to that in a minute. I want to talk about commitment real quick. Actually.
I just want to run.
You want to run?
Yeah, I just want to get out. It's like, marriage, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to say, okay, let's just separate. This does not feel
Have you been
good.
divorced before?
I believe probably, yes, I have.
You have been divorced before. So, yeah. Divorce, and you raised a child by yourself?
No, I wasn't able to do that, but
Yeah.
I've been divorced.
Okay. I like Joyce Myers, and I listen to some of her stuff, and she has a tape on commitment that I listen to. Actually, it's a whole series on integrity, and 2 of the tapes are on commitment, and so I like some of the things she said, and I'm going to quote some of her things. Commitment stays around after the goosebumps are gone. I thought, wow, that's kind of cool, Commitment stays around. And this is something that this isn't what she said, but I always say the commitment is not to the person, because you don't always feel like being committed. You just want to run. You're like, if he says one more thing to me, if he does this, I just want to get out of here. The commitment is not to the person, it's to the commitment. So you have a commitment to your commitment. And if you keep that in mind, I mean, I don't know if it makes it any easier, but you don't always feel like being committed to the person. Commitment means you finish what you start. She says the Hebrew definition is prosperity. Prosperity, commitment. I'd never thought of that. It says if we do what we want, it will destroy us. Commitment goes along with integrity. It's a firm adherence to a code. She uses the example of, how many of you would leave here and go rob a bank? How many of you would walk here and walk in a bank and rob a bank? I don't think any of us would, because that is beyond our boundary or our code of ethics for us. What happens is that we ease into what's comfortable. So, maybe those bank robbers stole from their parents or they didn't just all of a sudden, I'm sure some of them did. They didn't just all of a sudden walk into a bank, hold up a gun and say, I'm going to rob. They've eased themselves past their boundaries and what they're comfortable with. And I always say that about cheating too. Somebody who just goes out and all of a sudden cheats or, has an affair, they've eased themselves into that. They've eased themselves into that boundary and what's comfortable. Like we wouldn't go out and rob a bank. We have our boundaries. Well,
I think it's true to be said even as a victim, when somebody is saying mean things to us, I guess you accept the first mean thing and then you accept the next mean thing.
And they push.
All of a sudden, then it's just horrible.
Well, they say one thing that's kind of mean, and
instead of standing up for myself, I would just say, well, maybe,
maybe I deserve that.
Maybe that was foolish. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Or he's just angry because of something that happened at work, so I'm really not going to say anything. I'm just going to ignore it. And, but what happened was the boundary got pushed back and pushed back to where I felt like I wasn't worth standing up for myself.
So it's not about robbing a bank. That was just an extreme case, but it's about allowing more and more and more. Well, if I would have given him more attention, then he wouldn't have cheated. But, we've pushed the boundary. I'm going to read something else. Oh.
I think lack of communication with each other, really telling each other honestly how we really, at times don't feel like we're in the relationship, but yet our actions, just communicating with each other. And saying, this does not feel good, and I don't know, this doesn't feel good for me.
I just listened to something that said that. It was a thing on dating. And this woman was telling somebody, said, if somebody is doing something, if you're dating somebody and he's spending more time away, Tell them, this does not feel good to me. I am lonely. I am sad. And I thought, wow, you know, if you just tell them how you feel, then they can't, well, you always did it, or, you know, they can, but, you know, if you tell them how you feel, then it's up to them to figure out, like, their example was, this doesn't feel good to me. We've been dating for 2 years. This isn't making me happy. For myself, I want to be married, and I want to be married for a long time. And it doesn't say, if you can't do that, then I don't want to be. It just said, this is what I want. And she said, within 2 months, and he says, well, what do you want me to do? And she said, you know what I want. Now you need to figure out what you need to do. So it gave him the freedom, and then that was his idea, not you telling him what to do. And she said within 2 months, she had a ring on her finger. Because she gave him, she said, this is what I feel, this is what I need. Now you go figure it out. If it's worth figuring it out, you lay your hands off of it. I think we just all try to control everything. I do that. I try to control, I try to change, I try to help somebody. I say help, but tell them what to do, you know. I'm going to read this misconception about love. This is from, I use a lot of stuff from Smalley Relationship Center. And if you haven't, have you ever looked at Smalley? Gary Smalley? Yeah, sure.
A husband and a son that says they don't like him because he's really down on the men.
Oh, really?
I know which one it is.
Do you want to know something? My son, and I'll get to this later. My son took a relationship class in college this semester, and he, after the class was over, he liked it. But he said, I think the teacher was a male chauvinist. I said, why? Was it a man? He goes, yeah, it was a man. But he said that the men are to blame for all the problems in relationships. And I go, well, what does that tell you, Brett? So, I mean, you know, I think it's just because men have not been taught how to have relationships. They're not emotional. Yeah. Oh, hi, Ron. You know what? We've already had these discussions. Ron and I have talked a lot about all this stuff. So, okay. The images of love leave us. You know what? I read. Somebody told me a joke the other day. There's 2 ways. Wait. Oh, how does it go? There's 2 ways to rationalize with women, and neither one of them work. Okay. The images of love leave us with serious misconceptions. This is what people think love is. Passion equals love. My lover should meet all my needs. Once love dies, you can't get it back. Chemistry is all that matters. Love conquers all. When things get tough, it means you have the wrong partner. My lover should make me happy. Once in love, you stay on a high forever. Love is a feeling, and either you have it or you don't. These are all lies, or at best, gross misunderstandings of the true nature of love. The chemistry plays out. You eventually come off the high of infatuation, but that does not mean love is dead. Not at all. In fact, it may be just beginning, and that is where the work begins. All the behavior skills in the world won't pump life back into an ailing marriage if the couple doesn't trust each other, if they don't feel safe, unconditionally loved, valued, and understood. Are you creating a safe and secure marriage? You are in the first 100 yards of a marathon. Keep running. So it's telling you that that's the first part of a marathon, just all these little feelings. Okay, so that's my deal on commitment. First, I want you to think of the 3 things that you used to do that made your mate feel special. Okay? Like, did you sing to him? Or that might make him feel terrible because you're a terrible singer. But did you buy gifts for no reason? Did you tell him that you loved his eyes? Or think of things that you did. Did you surprise him with a romantic getaway? Did you make him a special dinner? Did you dress fancy for him? Okay, so think of 3 things. Write them down or think about them in your head. Okay? Honestly, think of 3 things. Now, I mean, you're divorced, so, but you can think of them. Think of 3 things you did. Yeah, I used to do surprise dinners. My husband would come home from work, and I'd say, put on a suit, be ready in 20 minutes. And I would take him someplace and I would have a meal made and a romantic thing, and okay, that's one thing I used to do. I used to buy him gifts. So I mean, I think of those things. Now, for you that are married, I know you don't want to do this, but I want you to make a commitment that you'll do one of those things this week. One of them. And you'll have to put your pride down because you don't want to feel like doing it. I guarantee you, if you're in a bad place right now in your marriage, you don't want to do it. Do it. Just try it. Just try. And it's embarrassing. Like my friend told me, you know what, for a week, they made a conscious effort together to do it and they felt awkward. So you're going to feel awkward too. Let me tell you, I'm going to talk about some of the aftermath now of divorce. And you might know, have you been divorced before? Have you been divorced? Okay. Huh? You what?
It feels like everyone around me
is divorced. I know. That's why I have 50 friends that I could email. That I had a friend from Vienna, Austria. I was trying to think Austria, who emailed me. She was a friend in college and she lives there now. And she saw the email with all these names, and it was to my divorced friend. She goes, "You know a ton of divorced people." And I'm thinking, over there it's not as common as it is here. And I'm like, ooh, I do. That's another reason why I need to do this. But I want to talk about baggage. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. And it's because it's something that we don't think about when we're thinking about divorce. When we get married, especially if we're young, and let me tell you right now, when you date, when you're 20, in your 20s, and you date, and I'm going to tell you, I'm 44. When you date now, it isn't even in the same ballpark. It isn't the same kind of dating. I have a friend that just got divorced in July, and he's trying to date exactly like he dated when he's 20. I said, it's not like that. You don't go out, find somebody you love spending time with, and go, wow, this is fun. I think we'll spend more time together. And then you just go, wow, I just really love this person. I think we'll get married. Now, when you date, you have baggage. And everybody has baggage, even when you're in your 20s. Baggage from your family, baggage from how your parents treated you. But when you get married, you create baggage. You come together and you have baggage. Especially if you have kids. You have baggage that you've created together and a bond and, just baggage, just emotional baggage and how you relate to each other as a married couple. It's all baggage. Well, when we divorce, most of the time, people think, I can't stand this. I'm getting away from this. I want to leave this. And you think when you get a divorce, you're going to leave the baggage. Well, guess what? That baggage never goes away. You take it with you. That baggage doesn't go away just because you have a piece of paper that says that you don't live together anymore. You still have it, especially if you have kids. So, except now, you have two separate baggage that you're not working on together. You're two separate people. You have to work on this all by yourself, and he has to work on this all by himself. But now you've created 3 times the baggage because now you're fighting about alimony and child support and visitation and possessions. And I mean, you are adding tons more baggage onto your baggage that you've already created. So now you have your 2 separate baggages. Well, you know what? We're not supposed to be alone. God says that we're supposed to be with somebody, so we decide we're going to marry somebody else. Guess what? When they get married, when you get married to them, they have their own baggage with somebody else. But you have no control over their baggage. They have no control over yours. Whereas in the original marriage, you do have control over that baggage. So now you're together, you have 3 sets of baggage. It's a lot of load to carry. And I can guarantee you that sometimes people get married because they're so in love with that person. If they have baggage that you can't live with, that love will turn to resentment. You will resent that other person because, like on Dr. Phil today, that ex-wife won't leave you alone and you don't stand up to him because you're afraid you're going to lose your kids. And you can't toss away the baggage. You have created baggage. The minute that you get married, you've created baggage. Whether you think you can leave it, I don't know one person that's married that doesn't live with divorce the rest of their life. People who've been divorced 30 years still live with that kind of baggage. Whether it's emotional baggage, they may have not seen that person for 20 years, but they still have that kind of emotional baggage. People think that, and I've talked to somebody who said, you think that they're better after divorce. They're not better, they're just different. It's a new normal. It's another thing that you've crossed it's a new normal. It's not better, it's just different. So, now I'm going to talk about, I forgot to read my one thing. I listened to a radio program called FamilyLife.com, and they had the transcript on email, so I pulled it off. And I'm going to read this. They were interviewing a Steve and a Dennis, and a woman. So I want you to know that this is men talking after a divorce, okay? This is, we think men don't have feelings, sorry Ron, but this is a man talking, okay? Steve. It is a deep soul-level pain. Scripture describes it so beautifully. A man and a woman, two separate individuals, come together as one flesh. Think about what happens when you tear flesh. You rip it. It is very painful. In a symbolic way, when two people separate, they tear. They don't separate, they tear. And the tearing creates huge, gaping emotional wounds. And they're not two individuals. They don't become two individuals. They are two pieces of one flesh that are ripped apart. Now, the good news is they can become whole and separate and thrive again, but the process of healing is very difficult. Now, here's Bob's input. There's a time right after divorce that takes place that you wonder about the reality of what you just said. You wonder, will I ever feel normal again? Will I ever recover from this? And Steve responds, you will know that you will never recover, and you will not believe that anybody could understand the amount of pain you're going through. Time and again, the most common comment I hear from people who participate in a divorce care group is that I had no idea there were other people around me who understood what I was going through. One of the emotions people experience is that of alienation. It's rejection. You are alienated from the lifestyle that you had. It's probably not a willing alienation, but life as you know it has been disrupted to a major degree or maybe taken away from you. One of the strongest emotions that hits a person who has gone through a divorce is that of depression. And a woman says, I remember feeling very ugly, unlovable, undesirable as a woman, unsuccessful, a total washout as a human being. I just didn't care. I didn't care what happened to me. I stopped opening my bills when they came, let them turn off the lights, let them take my car. I just shut myself off from people. I stopped answering my phone. I created my loneliness. It really wasn't that I didn't have friends. I just didn't want to be around people. And I had to talk myself into everything. I had to remind myself how to, or even to do, basic things. Steve says, I would attempt to do the basic functions of life. I tried to appear normal and successful in my work. I would often close the door to my office. Thankfully, I had an office, and I would cry for long periods of time while I was at work. And I just had a friend, my friend who just got a divorce in July, says that his work, he is not 100% into his work. He has not been for a year. That he closes his door and he cries for hours. Steve says there's a huge, huge list of losses. You know, you think we lose a spouse in a divorce, and indeed you do, but you lose so many other things. You lose a lifestyle. You lose a partner to help you with the practical errands. Maybe your husband knew a lot about fixing the car or changing the oil. Now who's going to do that? You probably lose a lot financially. And so you start a grieving process. Not only the loss of a mate, but all these other multiple protracted losses. And it becomes a huge job to work through the grief. Now, do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
I do too. I think it's, you know, even though you think somebody might be having an easy time of going through a divorce, it's a lie. I mean, I don't know one person who's had an easy time. Oh, it's best. We just didn't get along. They might feel that way 5-10 years from now, but the grieving process is horrible. I'm going to talk about the effects of divorce on children. And like I said, I teach a single parenting class, and I was just shocked that they asked me to teach that. But then I thought about it, and I'll tell you a little bit about my son. I have a son who's almost 20, and he is an awesome kid. I'm so proud of him, and I always say, God knew what he was doing when he gave me him, because I wouldn't have been able to handle, as a divorced woman of 11 years, anything else. He's a dream child, not just for a single parent, but also for, an intact family. I mean, he has his faults. He's lazy, and he can be sassy, and, he has lots of things I'd like to change. I wished he'd come to church with me more, and he says cuss words sometimes. So don't get me wrong, he's not perfect, but for a single parent, he's a great kid. I tried really, really hard during and after our divorce to shelter him from all the evils of divorce. I made sure that our house looked like it was a two-parent household. We had all the tools in the garage, and I worked really hard to make the yard look like a man did it. I bought stuff, for the yard that power tools. I had power tools, and I did things that to make it look like he wasn't from a two-parent household. When he was in 3rd grade was the first year we got a divorce, and we had a teacher that we had a parent meeting before school started for all the parents, and the teacher asked, how many of your children are from divorced houses? And of course, because we had just gotten a divorce, we raised our hand. And I bet you there was 6, 7 kids in there that their parents raised their hand. She says, well, let me tell you, they're the most difficult children to deal with. They are the ones who cause the problems, and they're the ones who, she just labeled my son before she even met him. And I tell you what, it was the most difficult school year he has ever had. He was in trouble all the time. And it wasn't, I thought maybe it was because we were going through a divorce, but I can guarantee you it wasn't, because towards the end of the year we had a picnic. And I went, and it was inside because it was raining. And I went, and they were going on a field trip the next day. And I observed Brett in the classroom and all that. And she, at the end, she said, well, Brett was a little out of hand today. So I said, well, do you need me to take off work and go on this field trip tomorrow? And he didn't do anything that I noticed that was out of the ordinary. Well, she said, no, we'll be fine. It'll be fine. Before I got home, and I live 5 blocks from the school, she had called my ex-husband and asked him to go on the field trip because she wanted somebody there to watch Brett. So I knew that it wasn't, she had labeled my son. And I really could have got her in a lot of trouble because of that. But it was a difficult, it was difficult. My ex-husband and I get along great now. We knew that we were a team. Even though we weren't together, and it took about 2 to 3 years, I'm telling you, my divorce was not easy. It was horrible. It was ugly. My husband got thrown in jail for a night. It was ugly. I can sit here and I can act like, everything's great. We get along great. In fact, I've traveled with him and his wife to watch my son play baseball. I sat with him. My son plays baseball at Wichita State. He is on an academic scholarship. He has a 4.0, and he's on an athletic scholarship. So when I say I'm proud of him, I am proud of him. And I don't want to sound like a braggart mom, but I say these things to make a point, okay? And the point is, look at what you can do. It doesn't matter if you're married or not. But what I'm saying is, we've made a point to make it a good relationship. It was terrible. I had to constantly tell him what's best for Brett. Forget about me and you. Forget about that you're jealous. Forget about that I have a boyfriend and you won't, you're nasty. I had to constantly say, what's best for Brett? What's best for Brett? What's best for Brett? And we do get along, but we didn't always. We are humans. We do argue still, but you know what? We'd argue if we were married. So for me to think that because we're divorced and that we have a common goal of raising our son, who's raised now, who just moved out Sunday, we'd still have a common goal, and that common goal is our son, regardless of our pride. And that's another word. I say that all the time. It's our pride that gets in the way of us, with our kid. I thought I did an excellent job, and he'd grown up with no side effects. Well, I told you that he took a relationship class at WSU. at the end of the class, he had to write an 8-page report. And what he had to do was rebuttal something that was common knowledge or something to do in relationships. Well, what he decided to do was talk about how divorce affects children and all these statistics, that he wanted to prove that, you know what, look at me. I'm not affected by divorce. So I read he gave it to me. It's 8 pages. 8 pages of a school report that has lots and lots of references on lots of studies and lots of college, dissertations. And it has all these statistics on all these kids. And I meant to bring it, but he won't give it to me. He will give it to me. He just hasn't yet. The last page of this report he was supposed to rebut. He was supposed to say all these things that, look at me, okay? The last page was, okay, I've written 7 pages, and I'm trying to tell you that divorce doesn't have an effect on me, but I have to be honest and tell you that I do have effects. And some of them are now, some of them were when I was younger, and I know a lot of them will be when I'm older and in a relationship of my own. Talk about breaking my heart. Okay, here's a 19-year-old kid telling you, Mom, you couldn't protect me from it. It broke my heart because my kid, who's this awesome kid, is telling me he was affected. And I know he is. There's no way that he went through this and wasn't affected. I'm going to give you some statistics, just a few, because you know what? We're all statistics. I don't always get hung up in all that because we're female, we're in a certain age range, we do certain occupation. We're all statistics. Girls without fathers are 53% more likely to attempt suicide. Boys without fathers are 63% more likely to run away from home. My nephew is 27 years old. His mom and dad got a divorce when he was 3. And I started talking to him a little bit about this, and he says, you know what? His stepmom and my brother and his stepmom have been married for 19 years. And they're a great couple, but my nephew says, I always had this fantasy that my mom and dad would get back together. I have one place to go for Christmas. I have one house to call when I have good news. I have one place to go when I have grandkids. My 27-year-old nephew still wishes his parents were together. Even though he knows that it would never work, he still wishes. And I think, God, to carry that with you for 24 years, it really does affect our kids. Dr. Phil said this today, and I actually heard him say this another time, and I had this in here before I even heard it today, but he said it again. This kills me. When we argue and fight, it changes who your children are. Not just upsets them for the day or for the moment, it changes their personality. They experience fear and guilt, and I guarantee you every child feels like it is their fault. Wow, that's powerful. It changes who they are. I look at some of the things that, and I look back at, my parents were married for almost 50 years. 40 years. My dad died 10 years ago. They would have been married 50 years. But I look at some of the things my parents went, and my parents never argued. But some of the things that they did affect who I am. I have a fear of abandonment. I have all these things that I deal with, and my parents were happily married. So you think a happily married couple affects who your kids are. Think about the tragedy of them having to think that that they are the reason their parents aren't together. And not every parent did, not every kid probably thinks that. I surely can't think that. But I heard when some people went to the single parenting seminar in Phoenix, they came back with something that really kind of puzzled me. It said that the counselors down there said that when you get a divorce, you should always tell your children the truth about why your marriage ended. And I'm like, oh no, because I've always done a great job at protecting my son of why. And I don't want to dishonor him by going into the details because he loves his dad, he idolizes his dad, and I'm not going to go into that and make it embarrassing for him or my ex-husband. I don't want to make this embarrassing. I'm not going to tell you why we got a divorce. But I thought, man, if I had to set my 8-year-old down and tell him why I got a divorce, why would you do that? And the reason is, they said, is so that your kids don't think it's their fault. If you tell it to them in terms that they can understand, and I had somebody in my single parenting class that told me they did that. They sat down and they said, your daddy acted like he was married to another woman, and that is not right. That he pretended like he was married to somebody else, and you are not to do that. I went, wow. Wow. You know, now I look back, and maybe I wished I would have done that, because maybe that's part of what my son is saying, and maybe he feels like it might have been his fault. But that's one of the things I heard. Tell kids the truth about why you're getting a divorce in their terms. Gosh, and when you think about that, well, it could be harder than that. Here's a survey, some of the comments from my friends. Kids will carry their parents' divorce baggage into their own relationships later in life. Maybe that's what my son was talking about. Kids from divorced families think it's okay for them to someday divorce their own spouse because they saw their parents survived it and they can too. I mean, this is my friend's comments. I didn't realize the negative impact on my children and family when I got a divorce. I didn't realize it would cause such deep emotional issues. I assumed my daughters would be able to maintain a close relationship with their father. That did not happen, and that is where most of the pain and adjustments come from. So, I thought that was pretty powerful, because this is from people who actually got a divorce.